Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. You can learn more about 3PGC at 3pgc.org. Today, we have Kara Stamback with us. Kara Stamback, MS, has always had a passion for helping people, and growing up with George and Linda Pransky, her early exposure to the three principles gave her that vehicle to do that. After earning her graduate degree in psychology, she began her career with Pransky and Associates, an internationally known organization which has pioneered the teaching of the three principles in business with individuals, couples, families, and professionals. In her 20-year tenure at Pransky and Associates, Kara has held nearly every role in the organization and is now a partner. Kara's current passion is designing virtual offerings. She and her sister Erika Bugbee bring an unwavering inspiration and enthusiasm in creating an entire web-based virtual division of Pransky and Associates to spread the learning that has changed their own lives and the lives of their clients. When she's not working, Kara enjoys spending time with her husband and 3 children and going to the movies too, like that. So, Kara, thanks so much for joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited about this topic, so excited about relationships. I've been doing a lot of coaching lately, and I'm so hopeful that with just such a little bit, people can can put their relationship on a completely different footing. And this topic that I'm talking about today has just been on my mind for a bit and has really helped me in my relationship. I'll give you a few examples later on of kind of what I've been seeing. But I'm really, really happy to be here, and thank you all for coming on and joining us live. It's so wonderful to be able to see faces and know that you're actually talking to somebody. And I'm glad for those of you who tune in later as well for the recording. Okay, so we're going to be talking today about expectations. And I couldn't really think of a way to start this webinar other than just to give kind of a spoiler right in the beginning. Because the thing that I've realized, and I think you guys will be able to see this. If not, I'm going to lay out a case for it over the next hour. But we are not entitled to anything in our relationships. It's just a myth. It's just a big fat misunderstanding that we're entitled, that we should have certain things in our relationships. And if you look closely, and like I said, over the next hour, I'm going to be kind of making a case for this. But the thing is that we have all these ideas, and it's innocent. It's understandable that we have these ideas. I mean, from the moment when we take vows, I promise to be true. I promise to be there in sickness and in health. I promise to be there and nurture for poor. And they're beautiful vows. I took those vows. I believe in those vows. I love that that's part of the institution of marriage. I think it's really nice to be able to have something that, you and your partner both believe in. But if you think about it, we're promising things for the rest of our life. And we have all of these ideas about what it means to be in relationships. And the thing is that they're just ideas. They're ideas that whoever wrote the original wedding vows came up with. They're ideas that we came up with from watching our parents or our friends, or watching Disney movies, which are, I think, majorly a culprit for the ideas that we have about marriage and relationships. Maybe they're even ideas that we came up with our partners, things that we both agreed on, things that, at the beginning of your relationship, you stayed up late talking about what is important in a marriage, what is important in having a partnership or a relationship with somebody. But wherever they came from, however valid they are, however much they make sense, and they do. I love the idea for richer, for poor, and in sickness and in health, and being true and honest and real. The fact of the matter is they're just ideas. They're just ideas that somebody came up with. And then we went ahead and concreted as if that could make them real, as if that could make them true. okay? And the thing about ideas is that, first of all, they're different person to person. We all have different ideas about things. And secondly, they change. They change. Our ideas change because life changes. Because we change as a person. We have different experiences in life. We have different priorities that shift what matters to us. Some of them are totally acceptable and understandable. Like if you get into, you become in a relationship with somebody, you guys have your ideas about what it means to commit and what it means to have a healthy relationship and what it means to, what you should be doing for that. Well, you have children. And everybody understands that when you have children, that changes. And you don't generally have to stop and check and say, gee, I know I promised that I would be there for you whenever you needed me, but now I have this child and I want you to know that I'm going to be there for this child before I'm going to be there for you. That's just something that that shifts and changes, that generally is accepted and understandable in, in the larger society. And so it works out pretty good because we both have this idea and everybody kind of understands. But again, what it really means is that our expectations, our ideas changed. And the difference is that was understood and acceptable, okay? But you will see that our ideas and understandings change all the time. And they were different even in the beginning of the relationship, even though we looked like we were had consistent, values with one another. There were a lot of things in the beginning of your relationship, as there are a lot of things now, that you weren't aligned on. Your ideas were different about what mattered to you and what you were trying to do in life. And it just wasn't really a problem. But at some point, our ideas and our expectations and what we feel entitled to, at some point they change, at some point they diverge. And the thing is that we can adapt to that. So I watched you guys ever watch America's Got Talent? It's an American talent show. I think they have it all in Britain and all over the world. So it's just a giant talent show. And I watched this story of this man, and he was a really big man, and they showed pictures of him when he was young, and he was a big person when he was young, and his parents encouraged him to do sports because he was athletic. He did sports, he played football. You saw him, he seemed to enjoy football. But when he tells the story, he said, really what I wanted to do is dance. I wanted to dance. And, but my parents were afraid, and they had his dad interviewed, and his dad said, I was afraid he was going to get bullied. I was afraid he was going to get teased. I didn't want that for him. I wanted him to be happy. I wanted him to be successful. I didn't want him to be, the brunt of jokes. So we encouraged him to play sports. Well, this beautiful man has kept his passion for dance. As an adult, he became a choreographer, and a very good choreographer, and choreographed all of these sports teams. And here comes America's Got Talent, and he came on, and he did his own dancing. He said, I'm ready to show up for myself and do what I like to do rather than choreographing for other people. And he's incredible. He's amazing. He's so good as a dancer. And I was so inspired by watching him dance and by watching his story. But the thing that touched me the most was the humility of his dad. So, you could totally understand where his dad was coming from. He was fearful that his kid was going to get teased and that would affect him for life. But now, all these years later, and seeing him on America's Got Talent and, performing and having people giving him a standing ovation, his dad was humbled. And what his dad said is, I was wrong. I had an idea, and I was sure about my idea. You could tell the way he talked. You could see it, and you can see it. I can see it, and people I know in my life right now, people have the same kind of idea, and it's completely understandable, but you see it become concrete. You see it become truth for them. And It's not truth. It's not truth. Would he have gotten teased? Probably. That was truth. Would that have been a problem for him? We don't know. Maybe it would have. Maybe his dad would have been right. We don't know. But the fact of the matter is, his dad can stand here today and say, I had an idea. I was sure that I was right about that idea. I did the best that I could, but I was wrong. And that's the thing is that it doesn't matter that we have ideas. We can't help it. And it's good that we can't help it. It helps form our lives. It helps inform our decisions. It helps us know where to go and what to do in life with our ideas. Ideas are wonderful and beautiful. There's nothing wrong with them. But to the extent that we take our ideas as fact, they turn into expectations, and they make us more rigid people. And that's damaging. It's damaging to ourselves. It's damaging to relationships. If you look around at your own relationship, you will see that whatever ideas that you have, if you see them as fact, they will affect your relationship. So I had a client years ago who was here to help her marriage. They had a young child, and she said, well, no, I mean, I really understand that, we have to, kind of let go of our ideas, and we have to, be able to be, flexible and figure things out together. She said, as long as he changes our baby's diaper, like before, she gets a rash, because it's completely unacceptable that she gets a rash, and you could feel her get rigid. You could feel, and I thought to myself, that's great. I don't want your baby to get a rash. I don't want any baby to get a rash. But if your relationship is hanging in the balance because your baby might get a rash, I don't know about that. You see, now, of course, it was easy for me to see because I wasn't the one who had a baby who was crying about getting a rash. My heart went out to her. I could see again why she would come up with that idea. But it's not in service to our relationship. It's not in service to our husband. It's not in service to our marriage. It's not even in service to our child. What about you? I would absolutely rather deal with having rashes as a baby and having my parents be loving and understanding of each other. And by the way, teaching me that our ideas and expectations of the other person are fluid, and that we can have humility about them. The ideas that we have, how attached we get to them. Let me see. They're the source of the pain. And the more we can see that, the more freedom we have to see it differently. So I was on a call with somebody actually just yesterday, and he told me a story. He said, one time I was going on a bus trip that was a 25-hour trip. And I was not looking forward to it. And I decided, I didn't have very much money. It was early in my life. I decided to buy a ticket for the first class section of the bus, because I thought, I'm a tall person. If I'm going to be on this bus for 25 hours, I want to have a little extra legroom. Now, this was in a foreign country. So she bought the ticket. She goes to get on the bus. And she goes and sees the bus, and it's this kind of broken down, barely looks like it's going to get anywhere bus. She said there were actually people on the bus with chickens. It was like a movie scene. There were actually chickens on the bus. She said that was the kind of scene it was. She said, so I went up to the counter to say, hey, I paid twice as much for my ticket so I could get first class. The person at the counter didn't speak any English. So there was nothing they could do. So they got on the bus. They were just absolutely seething. They were all cramped. They were in a really bad place. They were just kind of stewing and what kind of letters am I going to write and how am I going to get my money back? Well, after an exhausting 18 hours of being on the bus, they stopped and went up to the bus driver and said, how much longer will it be? And the bus driver said, 18 hours more. They've been on the bus for 18 hours. Another 18 hours. And she said, I was just seething. I was just so mad. My fists were clenched. I went back and I sat on my seat. The bus pulled out, and all of a sudden, she thought to herself, I could be mad, or I could let it go. And the next 18 hours are going to be a lot easier if I let it go. And she did. And the next 18 hours were definitely hard. It wasn't, there's no like amazing story of, I met this amazing person and we ended up getting married or anything like that. It just was an easier trip. And that's the potential that we have as we start to see the role that expectations play in our relationship and the role that our own thinking plays in our own expectations. Now, there's a huge range of what we expect from people, from our partners, from our kids, from our colleagues in any relationship. I have a friend who just felt like birthday cards and holiday cards were really important. They were a part of her family growing up, and she always gave birthday cards. She acknowledged people on their birthdays. They did cards for every occasion. So when she got married, she said to her husband, after she realized that he didn't live in the same world as she did, how important they were. And so for the first couple of years, he was totally on it with birthday cards. But at some point in the future, and it was before they had kids, so in her mind, there was no real, legitimate reason for it. He stopped giving birthday cards. It affected their relationship profoundly. 20 years later, she was still talking about it. So we have little things that affect us. And then we have big things, like our idea that that our partner should be there for us. I remember my sister talking about that. She did a webinar on it. That the idea that she had this idea, which again seems really legitimate, our partner should be there for us when we need them. Some people would say, why else do you have a partner? Well, our partner didn't sign up for that. And thank goodness, I can't be there for my husband every time he needs me. I'd like to be, I try to be, but I can't be a lot of the time. And I don't want to be held accountable for being there for him. But I tell you what, that doesn't really affect my disappointment when he's not there for me. So often we end up with a double standard. Why? Because they've got different ideas. They've got different ideas about whether somebody should be there for them. They've got different ideas in the moment. If they've had a really hard day at work and we need some emotional support, we need somebody to come and say, how you doing? Can I get you a cup of tea? And they've had a really hard day at work and they've got a lot on their mind and they might need the same thing. They don't want to be held accountable for that. They may even agree that we should be there for each other, but in that moment, they can't. But that doesn't protect us from the ill effects of our expectations on the other person. It doesn't change our feeling. Why? Because our feeling is created by a thought that we had that was legitimate, that became real, that we value. That we value, that we become, I don't know, righteous about. That then dictates the feeling that we bring to the other person. And worse yet, it dictates the feeling that we live in. I mean, I'm assuming those of you who are here on the call today resonated with the idea of expectations, that you know, to some degree see that, you know, that you have expectations in your relationship and that those affect your relationship. Just as you sit here now thinking about your partner, my guess is that you can feel the bad will, the resentment, the hurt is not even in the moment when they disappoint us. We carry it around. It becomes attached to them, kind of like, you know, that big cloud that Linus had, you know, in Snoopy and Charlie Brown comics. You know, he was always dirty, so they represented it as Kenny walked around in a cloud of dirt or dust. Well, that's what happens with us when we think about our spouse. We think about our partner. We walk around feeling disappointment. And it clouds the feelings that we really want to live in. We do it innocently. You know, we do it because we have this idea that relationships are supposed to be a certain way. They're supposed to be loving, and they're supposed to be committed, and they're supposed to be where we're, you know, helping each other out. And what happens is that when that's violated, we feel like that's wrong. We got to fix it. We have to tell them they have to change. We have to get back to where we were when we first got married, and we were, you know, aligned on all of these things, and everything was better. And we get focused on fixing it as if that's going to create the relationship that we want, the relationship that we had, the relationship that we're entitled to, the relationship that we see in the movies. That's not so. The relationship that we have, the relationship that we want, lives and dies within us. And expectations are just one way that happens. If we live in expectations and we take them seriously, and we get disappointed, and we live in that disappointment, that's your relationship. That's what you're living in. That's what you're creating. You're creating it within yourself, and you're certainly creating it within them, because people don't respond well to disappointment. They hate it. They shut down. They leave. They retaliate. Everybody's a little different, but they generally don't respond well. The love, the connection, the partnership, the looking out for one another, all of those things exist, not all the time, but when they're there, they're going to be there in the absence of disappointment, frustration, pressure. So my friend who had a thing about the cards, you know, and birthday cards, she would start thinking about it as her birthday came up, and she'd start dropping little hints, and, you know, and, oh, look at this is a nice card, and, you know, I sure really, you know, I saw a really nice selection of cards in the store the other day. Pressure. We put pressure on people. People feel our expectations, and all of those things get in the way of the beautiful feelings that is what we want. It's, it's what they call a primrose path. A primrose path is this little path in the woods that's all lined with primroses, and it looks like it's going to go to this lovely garden that, you can sit in and the birds will land on your fingers. That's the idea of a primrose path. And expectations are a primrose path. We think it's going to take us to a better relationship. It's a dead end. It's a dead end. It's not going to change. It's not going to create the kind of feelings that we want. Now, let me address a question that I'm sure is on your guys' mind, because I get it a lot from my clients. Am I suggesting that because expectations, I'm saying essentially expectations are something that we created with the power of thought, and we take them seriously, and then they begin to define our relationship? Am I suggesting that we should never have expectations, that we should let go of all expectations? Is that what I'm proposing? Is that the answer to a good relationship? Well, it's not a bad answer. If you guys can see your way clear of doing it, I think it's a fantastic way of living. But I don't promote it as such, because it's hard. I don't actually know anybody who knows how to do that. And I don't think it's a problem to have ideas about what you want out of your relationship. And I think it's actually a really nice exercise to be able to share those and to be able to see where the other person is about it and to be able to learn from each other. So we can put things out there. My friend she can totally say to her husband, this is really important to me. And it would really mean a lot to me if you could do this. And she can come back 10 years later and say, we talked about this 10 years ago, and it happened for a while and then it stopped happening. It's still really important to me. Is this something we can do? You can do that as much as you want in your relationship, and it builds our relationship. It gives us an opportunity to learn from each other. He starts to understand how important it is to her. It gives her an opportunity to hear from him, to say, gee, I just really don't agree with cards because they cost $4. And I really feel like if we save $4 every holiday over the course of a year, here's what we could buy. Who knows what ideas he has that she would have no knowledge of. And it does open us up. Okay. But here's the thing. If we don't see ideas, our ideas, their ideas, as just a creation of our own thinking, and really quite arbitrary, okay, and changeable, if we don't see it like that, and we get righteous and we get entitled, we're not likely to get anywhere in the conversation, and it's likely to backfire. So I was thinking the other day about when you're on an airplane and it's delayed, or let's say because of weather, they have to land somewhere else, okay? So you're supposed to be going to Chicago, you end up landing in some other city, you get off the plane, everybody rushes to the ticket counter to find out how they can get rerouted to where they're going. There's an enormous line. Of course, the ticket counter is understaffed because they didn't expect this mass of people. You get to the front of the line, you get this super frazzled airline agent who is, being beaten up by everybody. Here's the thing. In my mind, you are actually entitled to get the best service you can get. You paid for this ticket. You clearly need to get where you're going. It's not your fault. The airline has a responsibility as a service provider to get you where you need to go in the most efficient manner possible. I actually, as a consumer, believe that I'm entitled to that kind of service. But the reality is, this is not the idea of the frazzled airline agent behind the counter. She has a completely different idea. She has the idea that she should be treated respectfully by every single person in that line, that she should be able to have help when she's in a position like this. And she's figuring, hey, my ideas don't count for anything. I've been abused by at least 50% of the people in this line, and my airline is not taking care of me the way that I'm entitled to be cared for. So she's coming from a completely different set of ideas that, if you stop and think about it, are really just as legitimate as your own. But they didn't look that way to the person that was directly in front of you, who was, swearing at her and threatening her job if she didn't get them to their destination and the place they're going to be. So you get to the front of the line. If you feel as entitled as the person in front of you did, are you likely to get the best possible service? Are you likely for her to go the extra mile and find the direct nonstop and grab a seat for you on that plane? No, you're not likely to. You might, she might accidentally do it, or just do it because she's too tired, but she might not put much effort into it at all if you show up and are not very nice to her. But if you disconnect or gain some perspective from your feelings of entitlement, even if they're legitimate feelings of entitlement, if you find some distance from that and see it as just one possible thought to have, and find and allow, in the absence of those feelings of entitlement, you're naturally flooded with thoughts of compassion and understanding. And oh my, thank goodness I am not that woman. I would, even though I don't want to be where I am, and I wish I was in Chicago where I was supposed to be, I would much rather be on this side of that counter than on that side of the counter. That naturally comes in, and you end up working together in partnership to figure out how to solve the problem at hand. So yes, we're entitled to things in our relationships. Yes, we can talk to our partners. Yes, we can talk about what we feel entitled to and why. But the sense of entitlement, the attachment we get to our expectations, that's where things are going to go awry. And it's a mess, because if we get entitled and we go into a conversation with our spouse about anything, even things like fidelity, or how much time they spend with us, or whether we have dinner together, whether they're on their phones during dinner, whatever we're talking about, if we have a sense of entitlement about it, if we take seriously our expectations, we're not going to get anywhere, and it's going to exacerbate the problem. It's going to make things worse. How many conversations have you come away from with your partner where you feel, validated? You're like, I was right. They didn't care. But it's not true. Generally speaking, if they're with us, they do care. And we have to be able to find that openness and the possibility that there's more than meets our eye, at least, that there's more that we don't see, if we want to live in a nice relationship, if we want the relationship to grow stronger, if we want nice feelings from the other person. It's got to begin there. It's got to end there. It's all we really have. So let me pause and see if you guys have questions, if this is making sense, if there's anything, any insight, anything you've seen from what we've talked about so far.
Verena, I unmuted you.
Well, thank you very much, Kara. That's really, really, really interesting. I'm wondering, like, when I have these expectations, and I can see myself pretty easily when I'm like getting reactive and angry, like with this, for example, with this airline agent, that that doesn't really help. But what if, what I notice a lot in myself, that I'm getting rather, how can I say, sad, or, you know, like more kind of inward, like I turn inward more. Yeah, and I mean, it's after the fact, because I have these thoughts that make me feel this way, and they are not really nice feelings, and it's like, oh, I want to get out of that. Yeah, so it feels like I'm in dead-end street there.
Yeah. Well, you are on a dead-end street. You know, I mean, we are on a dead-end street to the extent that we take our expectations seriously. There's nowhere to go. You know, if we're lucky, the other person will meet our expectations, and then it's not a dead-end street. It looks like we can keep going. It is still a dead-end street. It's just longer than we thought. But no, we are. I mean, that's the thing, is that when we have thinking about how things should be, especially things that are outside of our control, like a husband, which is outside of our control, we are not that person. We do not control that person. We did not create that person, and we're not the dictators of what they do and what they feel and what they think and what they believe. When things are outside of our control and we have expectations about how they ought to be, there is nowhere for us to go with that. And we feel that, we live in that, and that's what you are describing, Verena. And that is the value of understanding these principles, because I'm saying, look, there's no such thing as a perfect relationship. There's no such thing as having our, you know, expectations and values completely aligned with another person. We are in relationships are messy. Relationships are hard. Relationships are imperfect. They're imperfect. And we're in it all the time, trying to make sense of it and trying to find our way through it. But one of the things we can know for sure is that if we have expectations that aren't being met, sometimes we have expectations that are met, you know, that we'll live in the same house. That sounds good. I expect that. You expect that. Neither of us has to be disappointed about that for the most part. That works out great. But when we have expectations that aren't falling in place, we got to see that that's on us. That's on us. We either have to leave, which we can do. I mean, I'm talking all kinds of expectations. People have expectations that our partner will be faithful, you know, will not be in relationship with other people. People in relationships violate that all the time. We still can't have that expectation. Now, we can leave. If we believe that we should be in a relationship where somebody is faithful and they are not faithful, we don't have to deal with it. We can leave the relationship if our values allow. If our values don't allow for that, and we still want to be in a nice relationship, we got to get over it. So our choices are, we can leave, we can look to work it out with the other person, which is not a 5-minute, let me tell you what my expectations are, let me hear about yours, okay, we're good now, right? Sometimes it's a 2-year conversation about things. This is the nature of relationships. It's messy because our expectations and our thinking is very real to us. It's very important to us. It's validated by our friends, by the internet, by books we read. it's hard for us to navigate through our own thinking. It's hard for our partner to navigate through their own thinking. And it's even harder when we get our thinking together. But we can do it, we can try. And so we can leave, we can see if we can work it out, or we can get over it within ourselves. And sometimes the getting over it has to come first. You know, we got to be willing to, okay, this is what's happening. This is where we are. This is where he is. This is what he's doing. It's not good. I don't like it. It's affecting our life. I mean, I have those issues with my husband and our family. There's things that he does with our kids as a parent that I just don't think are good. I think they're bad for the kids, bad for them. And it freaks me out because I love my kids and I want to do everything I possibly can for them. I want them to be successful and I want to know that I did my part in that. And when I see him doing things that are not good for the kids, it freaks me out. And I get panicked and I get feeling like I have to fix it. And I try to, you know, fix it in my own way. And I try to talk to him about it and it's a mess. Sometimes it turns out after a giant, messy several conversations. But what I finally figured out, and I don't always see this in the moment, is that he loves our kids as much as I do. I know that, know that for a fact, okay? He wants to do as much for them as he possibly can. I know that too. But he can only do what he can do. And in these moments, I can also say to you that I'm almost positive he feels the same way about me. There's things that I do that he knows are bad for our kids. Only, you know, between the two of us, he's more disciplined about it. He doesn't say nearly the things to me about what I'm doing wrong as I say to him. Why? Because it's just my thing. I just lose sight of it. I get like you get. I just get in this, you know, state of fear and panic, and it looks totally legitimate to me. I'm like, it's our kids. Of course I'm upset. But, you know, the thing is that where does that take me? It does not take me towards anything productive. Maybe in that one instance, I can, you know, kind of step in, interrupt his parenting, and do something better for the kids in that moment. And I do that. Is that really solving the problem? No. No. It's really not helping things. And I'll tell you something else. It is not, it's not good for me to live in the feeling of urgency and fear. And it's getting me farther and farther from figuring it out with him. And so, like I said, sometimes I can figure it out with him. Sometimes I just have to come to peace with that's who he is. That's what he's doing. That's what's happening in our life. It's just what's happening. Because what other choices do I have, Verena? What other choices do you have? You can live chronically in that fear and disappointment and anxiety, or you can come to peace with it. In a way, it sucks. It does. But bigger picture, your well-being, your husband's well-being, the quality of your marriage, the environment I'm bringing my children up in, okay? The feeling that we live in that bigger picture, it doesn't suck. It's a good thing. It's a beautiful thing to let things go. It's a beautiful thing to let things go. It's just our ego. We just have to be willing to be wrong. Other questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. like anything else in the principles. People walk around, feeling pressured by life and stressed out by life, and you can't talk them out of it. You can't tell them that life isn't stressful. But at some point they can see it. So my client with the bus, if he had sat next to a guy that said, what are you so stressed out about? You're on the bus anyway. It doesn't really matter if you're mad or not. He probably would have blown him off, gotten up and moved over next to somebody with a chicken. But we can't talk ourselves out of it. We have to see the bigger logic that the feelings we create, the feelings of judgment for the other person, and the feelings of pressure to have the right relationship and the right feelings in that relationship, it's all coming from the power we have to create our reality through our thinking, power of thought, the power of consciousness to make that concrete and real and urgent and anxiety producing. And that unlimited power of mind to make real the insight of, I can let this go and it will be okay. He can be how he is and it will be okay. And once you glimpse this, once you start to question expectations, once you start to wake up to them and question their reality and naturally start to let go of them, something else shows up. So for a long time, I lived in a chronic dissatisfaction in my relationship. There were just so many things that violated what I thought should be a good relationship. And I was raised in these principles. I believed you should have a really nice feeling all the time. Why? Because you can. Once you understand the principles, you can be in a good feeling. There's nothing standing in your way but you. And so I translated that into our marriage, and it was a mess. I had this idea that you should be in a good feeling with each other, that you should be partners and have everything be great all of the time. And I was disappointed. And I thought, you want this too, and we should have this, and this would be good. And at some point I had the insight, that's me. And I had to see it big picture, and then the little picture started coming in. Each little thing would come up, and I'd think, well, okay, the big picture's me, but that's really important. He can't talk to me like that. If I'm kind to him, he should be kind to me, and he's not. And I started seeing that's expectation. That's my thought. And as I saw that, I stopped feeding it. I stopped looking for what was wrong. I stopped taking seriously when the what was wrong thoughts flooded into my head, which they did a lot. I stopped spending time with them, like a friend who is constantly wanting more time with you. And what I found, as I stopped feeding those and they went away, I found new things. I saw things, and this is really silly, but it's really touching to me. I realized that my husband made the bed every morning. I can't tell you how many years I didn't even notice that. Didn't even notice it. Because I don't really care if the bed's made. That's why I didn't make the bed. But he made the bed. And the day that I realized that, I was so unbelievably touched that he cared enough about, you know, where we live, in our bed, in our room, in our home. He cared enough to do that little gesture every morning. And he never said anything about it. He just did it. And then I started realizing there was so many things like that that I'd missed. And you know what it did? It filled me with gratitude. It filled me with love. And then I realized that's what I want. Gratitude and love. And from there, when I looked around, I realized I want all of those other things that I had expectations about, but they're not so important. That's what we can do for ourselves, and that's what we can do for our marriages, for our relationships with our husbands and wives and boyfriends, children, bosses, colleagues, friends. How I went so fast. I want to tell you guys about some other resources. If you're here, you like learning about relationships, there's other things. So first of all, we have a CD called Desires, Wants, and Needs. It's a CD, a digital download. Really, really good, supports this. Anybody who's on this call or who listens to the recording in the next week before October 6th, you can get it, you can download it from our store for free. So you go to our store, find Desires, Wants, and Needs, put it in your cart, and use the code 3PGC free. And you can have that recording for free. The other thing that's free is the other webinars on 3PGC. If you guys haven't heard them, George and Linda did one earlier this month that I heard really, really good things about. Go back in the archives and check those out. I've done ones in the past. Erika Bugbee's done ones in the past. Really good. And then the other thing I'll tell you about is we did an online course on relationships that we're promoting right now with a sale. It's an amazing course. It's about 8 hours in total content, and then there's, I don't know, several more hours of bonus content. We spent probably almost 2 years putting it together, really thinking through what do we know about the principles, what do we know about relationships. There's a bunch of interviews with a lot of principles people. So George and Linda have 2 exclusive interviews, and all of this is exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. Dickon and Coisy Bettinger are on there. Rohini and Angus Ross, I think they've done webinars here. Aaron Turner and his wife, Leela, are on there. It's a fantastic course. It's 50% off right now, but the sale, 50% off sale ends tomorrow, Friday. But because I was doing this webinar today and it was right before the sale, and I know so many people listen to the recording, we wanted to extend the 50% off sale to the 3PGC community. So any of you guys that are listening now or that are listening on the recording, if you buy the course by October 6th, you'll still get 50% off, and the code right now, if you buy it today, you don't need a code. But if you buy it anytime after tomorrow, you'll need a code, and the code you can use is 3PGC50, which is 50. So 3PGC50 is the code, and then you get half off of that course. Check it out. If you go to our website, there's a page with information about it that says everything you could possibly want to know about this course, and then I think a little bit more. Like I said, we just put so much into it, and it's got so much potential. We wanted to have everybody be able to, get their questions answered. So I hope this is helpful. I hope that you guys, I hope that your relationships are better because of it. I don't have a hard stop, so if anybody has any additional questions and wants to stay on and ask them, I'm more than happy to stay and answer them. Love answering questions from you guys. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. 3PGC, thank you so much for putting these together, and Bonnie for showing up and being such a delightful host. So great that we're all learning about this, and that you guys are all putting your time and energy into it, and then sharing it with those that you're in the relationships with. And so thank you for being a part of, making the world a better place.
Thank you. And I don't know if you want to take this as we're recording, but Verena has her hand up again.
Oh yeah, I'd be happy to.
Just another quick question. Like for when I have expectation not just against the other person, but when I have expectations of myself, then can you say something about that? Maybe?
I definitely can. I'm so glad you brought it up because I had this on my notes and I forgot to get to it, and I'm so happy. I had this coaching call with this woman yesterday, and this was one of the most beautiful coaching calls because she had been doing our course. She'd done it she'd done the first 3 weeks of it, and she said, I'm already seeing some things. She said, but the weirdest thing is happening today. It just seems to be hitting me today. And so she was just telling me kind of what she was seeing, and that she was starting to see all of the pressure that she put on herself and all of her own ideas, and that she'd lived in for her whole life. And she was starting to get some distance, like right in the moment that we were talking, she was starting to see right then how she was starting to see it as if, I don't know, as if she were kind of almost in a dream. Have you ever had that experience where you've seen yourself kind of thinking something that you've always thought, and you've just always been like this, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm like doing that. I realized that one time about eating sugar. I just kind of would eat, sugar, and then I would eat more sugar, and then I had this idea that I might go off sugar for a while, and so I had this new thinking and a new relationship to thinking about sugar, and then all of a sudden I started noticing that I wanted something sweet, and I had a distance from it. I was a little bit farther from it, and I could see it. And that's how she talked about it. She could see that all of a sudden she could see what was happening to her. And one of the things she said that it just touched me. She said, let me find my notes so I can say the words. She said, all of a sudden, I had compassion for my thinking. She said, the poor thing, it's just trying to help. It's just trying to help. And it was just so beautiful and touching, because that's right. It is just trying to help. We just want a good marriage. We want a good relationship. We want to be happy. We want our partner to be happy. And our expectations are just trying to help. They don't know any better. And the feeling of that, I felt like it knocked me across the room, because I thought exactly what you said, Verena. We're so mean to ourselves. We hold ourselves to such high standards, and we're so uncompassionate.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could see it the way that this beautiful woman saw it, and just see, look, our thinking doesn't know any better. It never went through this training when it was a kid. We don't know how to live life. We don't know how to be in relationships. We don't know how to be parents or how to be successful in the world. We don't know the ultimate answers to those. We just do the best that we can. And our thinking is just trying to help us out. And what we talked about on my call with her is kind of like parents. As parents, you think about your parents, and they had to take care of you when you were a baby, and then they guided you when you were a kid, and then they did their best to help you as you were, a teen. And then at some point you became an adult, and they didn't have to help you, and they're not supposed to help you. You're supposed to do it on your own. But they still want to, and they still try. And they can't help it. And then we want them to care. We might want them to shut up sometimes, but we definitely want them to care. And that's the thing, our thinking cares about us. It wants us to do best. And we just, just like when you become an adult and you have to kind of figure out, okay, my parents care, I want them to care. I can't control whether they tell me what to do or not. I just have to figure out for myself when to listen. But I can love them for caring, and I can accept their caring. And I think that, you know, we don't want to deny our thinking and our expectations and our ideas. We don't want to deny those. We don't want to shut them down or shut them off. And we can't. Even so, even if we wanted to, we can't. Our thinking does what it wants. And we only have so much control over it. I mean, we can stop intentionally and like think of pink elephants and then everything else will leave our heads, but we can only do that for a few moments at a time. The rest of the time, our thinking is just going to bombard us. And if we can lovingly embrace that and then choose whether we listen or not, choose whether we act, choose whether we foster it. Because remember, the nature of thought is to come and go. It's gonna leave. Doesn't feel like it. Feels like it's gonna be for forever. Feels like we're never gonna let go of this. But as you take this in, Verena, and I know you're doing the Insight course relationships too, so as you learn, as you take this in, it will settle in you. This learning will settle in you as it already has. Your thinking will change naturally. Why? Because it's in its nature to change. It is in its nature to go away. It is in its nature to evolve. And you will find that better things are waiting to step in. And compassion and understanding and just really embracing just the fact of our thought, you know, embrace this is what we got. This is very much the same as, you know, if we get married, that's who you got. That's who you married. You can leave. You can divorce them if you want, but until you're divorced, you're married. You got this person, whoever and however he is, and you embrace them. And when you can't embrace them, you do your best not to pay attention to yourself. And we do the same thing with ourselves. We have a whole bunch of thought that's wonderful and helps us and feels great, and we have a bunch of thinking that doesn't. But just like we got to embrace the whole husband, we got to embrace the whole principles, the whole of them, the good, bad, and the ugly, the understanding and the misunderstanding. Just embrace it and let it sort itself out within you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Linda does a really nice job talking about frailty too in the course. It's exactly what we're talking about. So look for that in the end. Any other questions? Any insights? Anything anybody saw in this that they want to share? Probably not, but I'll ask because I love hearing what people have to say.
Looks like someone on the phone unmuted themselves. Maybe not. You know, something came to mind when you were talking about noticing that your husband was making the bed and how you hadn't ever noticed that before. It really hit me how when we have expectations, no matter what they are, a relationship or in life in general, that it's like that saying, you can't see the forest for the trees. We miss out on so many incredible things in life because our expectations focus us on looking for that and getting disappointed by not having it and looking for it. And yeah, that was really insightful for me. Yeah.
I like that metaphor too, because a forest is so vast. And that's what I glimpsed, like the thing with the making of the bed, I started to realize there's hundreds of things like that. There's so much I'm missing in him. So even as I sit here today and I've changed significantly, I appreciate so much about him, and I do, you know, my expectations have really, really subsided, but I love the forest is so vast and it goes on, you know, beyond what we can see. And that's the case with any of our spouses. People are amazing and they have so much to offer. Happens a lot. You know, you see people who get divorced and then their spouse gets remarried, their ex-spouse gets remarried, and you're like, well, how come you didn't show up like that in our marriage? Well, the thing is they were there. They were there. I mean, I don't mean to say that it's our fault necessarily. There's all kinds of things that happen, but there's so much potential within people. And expectations are never going to bring it out. And seeing the forest nature of it, as you point out, Bonnie, that's what's going to bring it out for them and for us.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else that has anything before we sign off here? No? Okay, well, that was wonderful. Thank you, Kara. And just want to let everybody know that our next webinar is October 12th, noon Eastern time, and it's with Dr. Amy Johnson. So hope to see you all.
Love Amy Johnson. She's so good. You definitely catch that one.
Yeah, great. Thanks again.
Bye, guys.